Hi, class, and welcome to our last chapter of social psych. Today, we're going to cover chapter 14, altruism. We've got three major areas of this to cover: this idea of pro-social behavior and altruism, cooperation, and then talking about some bystander intervention here. But this leads us to an important question. What is altruism? What is pro-social behavior? Well, pro-social behavior is any action that helps another person. So giving money, saying a nice word, smiling at someone. This can be self or other focused too. You can be pro-social for yourself or for others. Altruism, on the other hand, is a desire to help another even if it costs the helper. So, right, if I give you money, it might cost me a little bit, but this is always other focused here, right? Like, this is not because of me. On the one hand, we can ask, does pure altruism exist? This behavior that benefits another another person intentionally for no external or internal reward. And I'd argue that it's kind of hard to say that pure altruism exists because you might feel positive if you help somebody, right? So it's just kind of an interesting philosophical question of if pure altruism does even exist. But let's think about why we help others, right? There's reasons to just ignore people, there's reasons to help others, there's reasons to hurt others even. Well, one reason we might help others is because it's socially rewarding, right? You might give blood because it brings good things, right? People like you more. You might give blood, or you might do something nice because you want to get rid of negative feelings. Maybe you saw that there was somebody, who said, we really need blood. Could you please give today? And you said, well, that'd make me feel better if I did that. Or, another reason why you might go give blood, is because you identify with the person or the situation. Maybe you had a family member who had to have a bunch of blood transfusions. Maybe you had to have a bunch of blood transfusions. And so, in terms of, pro-social behavior, why would you go to give blood? It could be any of these reasons. It depends on your intent. The reasoning that you go to do this kind thing is going to matter. And so if you're doing this for social rewards, typically this is based on kin selection. So, your family. So these are behaviors that help our genetic relatives. And these are favored by natural selection because, well, we want to pass on our genes, whether this be brother and sister, twins, whether this be mom and dad. The idea is that your genes need to survive. You don't necessarily need to survive, right? So, I am going to save my child over myself, probably because she's going to go further in this case. And we also help those who share our genes. We like those who are like us. But now imagine a question like this. You're on vacation in a cabin in the woods with your brother, your brother's girlfriend, your aunt, and your cousin. You're in a 5-bedroom house and everybody is sleeping in a different room. Don't ask me why. This is just the way the situation works. You wake up in the middle of the night and you find that the cabin is on fire and is soon going to collapse. Everyone's alone. You have time to save one person other than you. Who do you go to warn? Your brother, your brother's girlfriend, your aunt, or your cousin? Most people will say your brother, right? Why? They're closer to you, right? And so when it comes to non-threatening ideas of helping, we see that we care more about people who are closer to us. And it's even more so for those close to us if this is life and death related. But you could make an argument. Aren't you also emotionally attached to these people, right? Like, mom and dad are my parents, sure, but I've also invested a lot of time into loving them. Well, then that leads to another question. Imagine that 4 people want your help. Who are you going to loan $100 to? Are you going to loan $100 to your brother who always steals from you? Your roommate who never returns your favors? Your friend who tends to be oblivious to what's going on? Or your colleague who is likely to help you in your future? You're probably going to give that money to the person who's going to help you, right? Why would you rather help them than somebody closer to you, right? This is almost a stranger. You just work with them. Well, this is the idea of reciprocal altruism, right? I can't talk about kin selection towards my non-kin, but this is the idea that, well, if I scratch my back, you'll scratch, or if I scratch your back, you'll scratch my back, right? Because we are working on reciprocity norms. If you help me, I'll help you. right? This is the idea of why monkeys, for instance, are helping each other picking out these bugs, because somebody's going to come along and help you as well. So what determines this idea of social rewards and whether or not you're really going to help, I will say, is kind of this cost-benefit analysis. So we can think of this as an exchange theory, right? Like, I'm exchanging something for you for getting something back. And so if there are more benefits than costs, right? If you see somebody struggling with 100 books in their arms and you have to open the door for them, you're going to open the door for them. You're going to help them because it doesn't take you anything. But on the other hand, if somebody is going to say, hey, can you carry all these books up the stairs for me? You're probably not going to do that because you don't know them. It's just wasting your time. So this is going to argue, though, that pure altruism doesn't exist because it really can't. And a really fascinating study that took place was we put a bunch of grad students on a train on the subway, and we had them fake collapse, like, they passed out. Half of them had a blood pellet in their mouth they crunched down on and, had blood coming out of them. When there was blood on the train, about 65% of Confederate or people would help the Confederate. When the person wasn't bleeding, 95% of people helped them. This is crazy, right? Because this is going to say that there's an extra cost for doing this. What happens if I get the blood on me? And not just like, ooh, there's blood on me, but like, what if he's sick? What if that gets me ill? I'm nervous about that. Versus if somebody just collapses, maybe it was a water thing. It's different here. So in terms of social rewards, it could be kin selection, it could be reciprocal altruism, or it could be social exchange theory. However, we might also help somebody due to feeling personal distress. So what we call the negative state relief hypothesis, which we've talked about before. This idea that when we feel bad, we want to get rid of it. So we might see someone in distress that makes us feel bad, right? And so we might say, I don't want to feel that way. I'm going to give money to charity, right? So this is going to be this idea of how do we remove that negative affect, that negative state I'm currently feeling? Well, I can give money. That's one way to do it. So I'm being extremely negative, I'm realizing, right? Kind of arguing that altruism doesn't exist is pretty cynical. But this is a good point. What about helping people because we're nice people and we're compassionate and we love each other, right? Like, think about Oskar Schindler. He had no reason to help all of those Jews. Or Sempo Sugihara, who was literally throwing out passports as his train was leaving the Nazi regime, trying to save more people. And he said, I need to help these people, right? It doesn't matter if you kill me, I'm going to choose to help. We help at great personal costs, right? Is this the idea of pure altruism? The idea that, you jump on a grenade for somebody? There's an argument against it. You could say that the person did this because they knew that, right, they were helping, or, that maybe their family would be proud of them or they would be remembered. But, right, this is kind of the interesting question. So what I'd like to do is talk about this idea of empathic concern. So one important thing we've got to focus on is, are we identifying with this? Are we feeling empathy towards this person? Understanding what that person is experiencing? Imagining the world from their shoes? If we are, turns out we're probably going to help somebody, right? And so the empathy altruism hypothesis, which I've got down here, says that, well, it kind of depends on, are we going to focus on the other person's perspective? And, if we feel empathy for them, we're going to help regardless of costs. If I don't feel empathic for you, but I still want to help, I'm just doing it for the social exchange. So an example of this here, to change this. So imagine that I see a homeless person in the street. And I feel empathy for them. And I say, I imagine a time where somebody I knew or myself was living in a situation similarly. And I think, boy, that would suck to be me. I want to help them. So maybe I go give them a couple bucks, give them the rest of my dish, or if I just ate at a restaurant. On the other hand, what happens if I'm walking by this person, right? And I'm with my boss. Well, I might help them because I want my boss to think I'm a good person, right? Social exchange, I'm going to be rewarded. I'm going to be looked at like a good person. If I was walking alone, I very much just might walk right by them and not help. Or if my boss wasn't the kind of person who cared about this, or, whatever it might be, I'm not going to help here. So a study showing this is called the Help a Psych Student study. So we asked people about Carol, who broke her leg in a car accident. She's really been struggling with schoolwork. Right? This is 1980s, pre-internet, pre-Zoom, right? And so she's going to have to drop her psych class if she can't get a student's help. So we manipulated people. We told people either to be objective, non-empathetic, or to take Carol's perspective. Imagine what it would be like to be Carol right now. And then we manipulated how much it would cost you to actually help Carol. So it was either the case that Carol was in the same class that you already had, and so you could just give her notes, right? If, she's around, or she was in class, but now that her leg is broken, she's stuck at home. And so since there's no internet, you're going to have to drive over and give her a copy of your notes. Which one is going to be easier to help? And then, right, we ask you, how likely are you to, right, how much are you going to help? Will you help Carol? And what we see is that in the high empathy condition, if you think empathically about this, you're going to use empathy and you're going to be kind. It doesn't matter how difficult it is. On the other hand, if you're going to be objective, if you're not thinking empathetically, if it's harder, you're not going to help. You're not as likely to help, right? And so again, arguing that it's if we feel empathy for this person, yes or no, is going to determine this. So here is a nice little chart of everything we've kind of covered that we can help due to social rewards, whether that be kin selection, reciprocal altruism, or social exchange. We can help due to personal distress. We relieve our negative states. Or we think empathically. We use this empathy altruism that if we think empathically about this person, we are more likely to act altruistically. But from there, we're going to move on and talk about what we call the prisoner's dilemma here, and it involves cooperation. So imagine that you and somebody else that you don't necessarily know have committed a crime and you're arrested. So now you're both put into different rooms and the cops are going to talk to you both. Now, the cops have enough to say that you were breaking and entering to a property, but they can't find the stuff that you stole. So if you both stay silent, the cops are going to get you on the breaking and entering charge, and you're both going to serve 1 year. If you decide to squeal on your partner before your partner, or if you decide to go right and actually tell the cops what happened here, you say, all right, we did it. How's this? If I tell you what happens, you get, right, you cut me a deal. And they say, okay, as long as this other person doesn't, right? In which case you cut a deal, you tell them where the stolen goods are, this person gets sent to jail for 3 years total. Reverse it. What happens if your buddy, well, this person who you don't know, this other person rats you out? You would be in jail for 3 years and they would go free today. There's a fourth option though. What happens if you both talk, right? What happens if I say, yeah, that person stole all of it and here's where it is. And that person says about me, yeah, he stole all of it, here's where it is. Well, now they've got evidence on both of us, so they're going to give us a little bit of a longer sentence. Now you have a choice in this room. Do you choose to shut up or do you choose to talk? And so you can make this option. Now, this is, of course, what we call the prisoner's dilemma, and so this is as if you were a prisoner, but you could imagine this as a very similar game, but with money. Imagine you're in a psych experiment, right? You're never going to meet this person, but you can choose to cooperate. If you both choose to cooperate, you'll get $5 each. If one of you chooses to be nice and the other chooses to defect, go against, the person who defects gets $8. If you both defect, you only get 2. Which do you choose? This is the same game, actually, right, as the other one. Well, This idea of the prisoner's dilemma is a really great way to imagine cooperation. It doesn't seem like it, but this works in just about everything, right? You could imagine this kind of dilemma as getting your significant other a gift for Valentine's Day. Maybe you both are going to be happy if you don't have to spend money on each other for Valentine's Day, but if one of you gets it and the other one doesn't, it's a problem. There's a couple things that determine if we're going to cooperate or defect. Now, I should mention, right, like the original version I gave you says that you don't know this person. Because if this was your best friend, you both would shut up, right? And neither of you would rat on each other because you have a reputation with each other, right? If you know that the person is an honest and true person, you're going to go along with them. You're going to cooperate. But think about what happens when you're working with somebody who defects. And think about this from a lot of stories. Anytime that the bad guy, ends up defecting and having all of the people turn on him at the end. The example with Lucy and Charlie Brown up here, right? Lucy always pulls the football away, but Charlie Brown continues to cooperate even when he shouldn't. The construal of the game. So we talked about a little bit similar of a situation when we talked about construal of anger and guns. But if you call this game up here the Wall Street game or the community game, that affects how much people will cooperate or defect. People will defect more in the Wall Street game, right, trying to get more money. But in the community game, people are more likely to cooperate. Your culture also affects this. Unsurprisingly, it's the same way we've been talking all semester. Your interdependent cultures, your Eastern European cultures, your non-American cultures, these are going to be more likely to cooperate than more Americanized cultures. Low socioeconomic status is more likely to help than high socioeconomic status, and rural cultures are more likely to help than urban cultures. And this is actually the idea that is known as urban overload hypothesis, the idea that if you live in an urban environment, there's too many people, you can't cooperate with everybody. So what should you do here in a situation like this? Well, the best strategy is what we call tit for tat, stop laughing. The idea here is that whatever the person does to you, you should do it to them, but you should always start off being cooperative, right? So the idea is that if you have the option to cooperate or defect here, try to cooperate the first time, be nice. If they cooperate, stay cooperating. If they don't, defect. And the idea here is that you are kind of showing the other person that, yes, I'll be nice as long as you're nice to me. And this is what rats do, actually. When rats are going to share food with each other when those rats have shared food with that rat. If I know that you'll help me, I will help you, right? So this is going to argue that the best strategy is not always being kind, but starting off kind and punishing when you need to. This last portion of the course is going to cover basically a bystander intervention training. We're going to talk about the five-stage model of bystander intervention and how bystander intervention doesn't always work, how it can fail here. And so when we think about this, right, a bystander intervention is the idea when somebody who is standing around sees an emergency and helps. Think about social, just like our influences, right? Our social influences around us tell us what we should or shouldn't do, if we should conform or not. And so this five-stage bystander intervention model talks about the fact that there are 5 kind of major points that we have an inflection that we could help or we could not help. First, we're going to talk about, can we notice that a situation needs help, right? And then beyond that, there's obstacles to that. At each of these steps, there are different obstacles, and it's not until we get past all 4 stages that we end up helping people. So the first stage of the bystander intervention model here is the fact that we need to notice what is happening, and we might fail to notice. So this awesome study looking at this had people give a speech on the Good Samaritan story. Now, these were seminary students. There's a lot of S's in the sentence. Seminary students, so we're talking about people who are going to school to become preachers or priests, etc. And they were asked to give a topic on either jobs for seminary students. What can we do after this, after we graduate? Or this story you've probably heard, the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan story, the short of the long, is that there's a person sitting on the side of the road who needs help. And everybody walks by this person and doesn't help, except from a man from a Samaritan, right, who stops and helps. He's a poorer person when all the richer people go past them. And the idea is that we should stop and help everybody. What they did was they said, okay, here's the thing. You're going to go prepare this speech and then come meet us here. We meet them at that time, but this is all a setup. We tell them, uh-oh, you've actually got to be somewhere else to give this speech. And the thing is, you either needed to be there right now, you needed to be there pretty quickly, or, you need to get there eventually. So in between the building that you're at now and the building that you got to get to, we put a Confederate on the ground, laying down, who was sick on the path that you had to walk past. And what we measured is how many of these seminary students stopped to help. What did we find? It didn't matter what your story was. It didn't matter if you talked about the Good Samaritan. These people who knew that the story says you should stop and help. It only mattered if you didn't have to rush. So, what does this suggest? Well, oftentimes we're not even going to notice that we need to help somebody because we're in a rush. That you could walk right by somebody laying on the ground because you're so worried about getting and doing whatever you're doing. So the first thing we have to do is notice that there's a problem. Okay, so let's say we've noticed that there's a problem. Now we need to interpret that help is needed. So this kind of reminds me, if you've ever been outside and heard young kids screaming, and you got to pause for a second and go, is that a happy yell or is that an I'm getting murdered yell, right? And so that's kind of what I'm talking about here is I heard some kids scream, should I call the cops? So a study looking at this, I love these studies, has a man and woman fighting outside. And so the woman shouts one of two things. Get away from me, I don't know you. Or, get away from me, I don't know why I married you. Something my wife might say. Then we stop and we watch how many people stop, right, to help. Well, I think it's not surprising that when we hear that I don't know you, people are much more likely to stop and help, right? But when this couple is married, we don't necessarily interpret that as help being needed. Again, these arguments were the same arguments, but it just happened to be the different person here. This is the idea of pluralistic ignorance, the idea that everybody around us thinks that a situation is going in a certain way when in fact it's not. So oftentimes you might best think about this as when in a class, a teacher might ask, hey, does anybody have any questions? And you might have a question, but you look around and nobody else is doing anything. So you think everybody else gets it. And you go, oh, maybe I'm the idiot, right? But everybody else feels that same way too. Nobody wants to be the one to break the ice here. So, right, every student believes that they themselves has understood every concept I've ever said, right? But nobody, of course, wants to admit it. So imagine now we have noticed that an event has taken place. We have noticed that somebody needs help. We still haven't necessarily helped them. We might fail to take responsibility to help. Now, I'm not going to show this video here, but this is the smoke-filled room study, an incredible bit that really reminds me of this picture here. Basically, what is happening is we bring people into a room to fill out some questionnaires, and then we put a smoke machine in there. We start pumping smoke under the door. Now, what we change is who you're in the room with. Some people were in the room filling out forms by themselves. Some people were doing this with two other participants who had no idea what was going on. Some people were in there with two Confederates who pretended nothing was happening. Do people report the smoke? Oh my God, look at this. This is terrifying. That when you are sitting down and you see smoke coming in from under the door, like there's a fire out there, and the two people next to you are just sitting around not caring about it, the chances are that you're not going to go help. Why? Diffusion of responsibility. We think that maybe it's somebody else's responsibility to do this. Why would I risk helping when other people could help and it doesn't seem like anybody needs to do this? And especially if you can't tell if somebody's already tried something. You don't want to look stupid. So this is the idea of failing to take responsibility to help, but assuming that we realize that, hey, I've noticed this. Hey, I noticed you need help. Oh, I better help. What happens if we don't know how to help? This is our last possible obstacle here. Well, we could fail to understand how we could help. A cool study looking at this had people brought into a lab and filling out some questions. When they walked in, they saw a gentleman working on something on the ceiling on a ladder. While they were filling things out, the workman falls off the ladder. Now, you were either alone or with two Confederates, and we also manipulated who was doing this. Was it just students, or were these nursing students specifically? So what we measured was how many people helped. And look at this. When you're alone, you're likely to help no matter what, right? Because you figure that something is better than nothing. But nurses are more likely to help even if there are people around. Why? Because they're trained on how to do this. They know what to do. They're engaging those skills that they're already good at here. So, not only do you have to be able to recognize that somebody needs help on all of this, but you have to know how to help. Call the cops or, get the ambulance there, whatever it might be. And that leads us to helping. So we might be distracted. There might be pluralistic ignorance. We might fall into a diffusion of responsibility, or we might even feel incompetent. So, does this only matter in emergencies? No, it matters in all types of helping situations here. And so there are lots of places we might fail to help each other here. So recognizing this kind of major model saying that there's 5 stages that we need to get over to actually help one another here. In terms of how we can increase helping, well, I've already done step 1. I've taught you the barriers to bystander intervention. You now know them. So you know how to help people, right? You know to not just stand around. You know to go help. Fun fact about that, we did a similar study to that seminary school study where we have people listen to a lecture on the bystander effect versus an unrelated topic. And then later on, they were asked to do a sociology study where they had to walk by this person who was on the ground. Next to this person was somebody calm and just relaxed. So imagine that somebody is kind of passed out on the side of the sidewalk, and then 5 or so feet away is somebody just reading a book. What we found is that it didn't matter how long, how mentally distant that timing was that you learned about it. Understanding and hearing about the bystander effect, knowing this, makes you more likely to help in the future. So, this is your kind of charge to go help others in these cases because you've learned here. Now, kind of flipping this around, what can you do if you're in an emergency? Yell for attention. Get people to help you. Make it clear that this is an emergency. If somebody's bothering you, I don't know this person, or if you can hear me, I need help, please. I'm hurt, I need help. Additionally, if you're getting help, or if there's a large group of people around, being able to say to specific people, getting rid of the diffusion, making somebody responsible. You in the red coat, call the ambulance, do something, and instruct those people for what to do. So that's kind of everything when it comes to how we can actually deal with helping and being altruistic or at least pro-social. But to end the class, I just want to take a moment to talk about some of the major things that are related to psychology that we've learned this semester. The fact of the matter is social psych teaches us that it's both the person and the situation. It depends on most of this. We rely on each other. We're social creatures. And it turns out that we often give ourselves a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. We don't give ourselves, other people, the same person's situation consideration. Happiness comes from within. That if you want to be happy, focus on your emotional well-being and your personal life satisfaction. And that the world around you is completely made up of the way that you see it. If you think that people are good, you see the good in people. If you see the bad in people because you think people are bad, The way you construe the world entirely decides on how you choose to work with it or against it. We're emotional. We're not rational. We operate automatically on assumptions. But if we really need to, we can sit down and really think through it and find the best solutions. We always need to belong. It's important to be social and to care about one another. And right, we want to see our groups and ourselves as good. Right? So overall, we are kind of a very mixed bag. Humans want to be the best at sometimes the expense of others, even though we do care about each other. But thank you all for taking this class. I hope it's been beneficial. And if there are any questions or you ever need anything, don't ever hesitate to reach out. I love teaching psychology. That's why I do what I do. And if there is ever anything I can do to help, I hope I'm able to. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.